Indies, and you are now listening to our inaugural Pelican Talk. Pelican Talks is designed to bring positivity and talent to you. We are hoping to promote interactive and positive discussion with our alumni on a variety of subjects with alumni across the Caribbean and the world, and we are sure that these conversations are going to bring novel and exciting and enriching exchanges. Our first guest this morning is Lisa Cummins, who is the executive director, the new executive director of UWI Consulting. She is based in Barbados, but UWI Consulting is a regional office and is headquartered at the regional headquarters of the University of the West Indies here in Kingston, Jamaica. Lisa Cummins is a very interesting person. She brings many years of experience in Caribbean regional development, trade, international relations, public policy, and private sector development to the UWI Consulting. And prior to coming, she served as a diplomat and as executive director of the Barbados Coalition of Service Industries. She's had 10 years as a diplomat. She worked at the headquarters of the Barbados Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, as well as the Barbados Embassy in Washington D.C. She also served as trade advisor for the Commonwealth Secretariat to the Government of Uganda and the wider East African region as Uganda's lead technical advisor on trade and services. In that capacity, she was a member of the negotiating team for services in the East African Community Trade Talks with Europe and the EAC Common Market, and has worked on projects in East and Southern Africa for several development partners, including the World Bank, the European Union, and the Trademark East Africa. She also serves on multiple boards, regionally and internationally. She is the current chairman of the Inter-American Development Bank's Civil Society Consultative Committee and president of the Rotary Club of Barbados. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you very much. You make me sound very interesting indeed.
Well, you do have a very impressive resume. What's the most interesting thing about you that we won't learn from your resume?
Well, I think the most significant thing for me is that I am a dedicated regionalist. Professionally, dedicated regionalist. I am a Pelican, first and foremost. I started my tertiary level education right there at the University of the West Indies Mona campus, and I'm a proud urbanite. So that's one thing. And the significant accomplishment is that I'm the mother of an almost 17-year-old daughter.
Oh, that's a wonderful accomplishment, indeed. I'm very pleased to hear that you are a very proud Pelican. You know, that speaks volumes, in my opinion, but also that you are a proud urbanite, because I also am an urbanite. So a shout out to all urbanites all over the world.
Know thyself, urbanites.
That's right, that's right. In fact, Urban Hall is one of the first halls that is supposed to be remodeled soon. And I know that is of a little bit of concern to some urbanites not wanting to see the old building that they're so familiar with go away. But we are hoping that alumni will have a chance to have some input into the new design so that some parts of it are saved for the future as historically and for posterity. So when you come back next, we must take a stroll over there and see what's going on.
Well, I think one of the things that many of us in the urban group of my era has been talking about, we've been talking about the possibility of reaching out to urbanites all across the Caribbean, all across the world, and encouraging them to share their photos, their memories, their testimonials, so that we can prepare a coffee table book that then urbanites, wherever they are able to remember Irvine as it was and as we experienced it during the time that we were there, even as it goes into a new incarnation in the short term.
I think that's an excellent idea and one that I encourage among all urbanites all over the world. Please send in your photos. You can send them to Lisa at UWI Consulting or to me at the Institutional Advancement Division, and we'll see if we can collate them and come up with something really interesting for persons to have and to hold.
Absolutely.
Great. So tell us a little bit about how you envisage the future for UWI Consulting.
Well, University of West Indies is an amazing institution. I think it's one of the most, if not the most, important institutions here in the Caribbean region. when I started out by saying that I'm a regionalist, I think UWI epitomizes what we as a region represent. You know, this melting pot of all of the countries from across the region with all of our strengths and peculiarities just amassing themselves in one single place. And UWI Consulting really is meant to be able to leverage that very thing about the university. So across 3 campuses, as you introduced us before, we're headquartered at the Mona campus, but all of our campuses have very specific sectoral centers of excellence, research centers. We've done some very special things over the years in the university, and we have a number of skilled professionals in our faculties and departments, and a number of persons who have passed through the university as students who now form part of the alumni, who we, through UWI Consulting, are hoping to be able to move UWI Consulting into its next generation of thought leadership in the region, where we want to be able to work with our research centers to provide inputs to regional development strategies. We want to be able to provide advisory services to the public sector. We are, as we know, in a very difficult space in the Caribbean region at this time, but we're also in a very interesting stage, a stage where we have the opportunity to be at our most innovative, our most creative, and who better to use than our regional professionals who are either domiciled in the University of the West Indies or have passed through the University of the West Indies and are professionals in their own right. That's an important part of this for us. In terms of our private sector, we are now going to be launching imminently within the next few months our enterprise strategy division, where we're going to be looking at how we can leverage Caribbean firms to be able to expand into new spaces, into new markets. How can we bridge the gap between public policy and enterprise and the firm? And the university really is meant to be in the forefront of leadership on that. And we at UWI Consulting, as the commercial arm of the university, we will be spearheading that charge under the guidance of the Vice Chancellor, who is the chairman of our board, and who, as we know, is himself a very strong voice in the region on behalf of Caribbean development.
Excellent, excellent. I totally agree with you. The University of the West Indies plays a vital role in terms of regional integration, and I'm really happy to hear about this positive role that the, especially Enterprise Strategy Division, which I think will be very, very useful. How can UWI graduates get in touch with you?
Well, there are 2 things that we are going to be seeing happening. We want to be able to work with the Departments of Student Services on all of our campuses to reach out to our current graduate students, so that those persons who are currently in our system and preparing to leave our system leave their information and their areas of specialization with us so that we can reach out with them. In September, we will launch a Research Fellows program, which is going to be expressly geared towards UWI graduates, wherever they are in the Caribbean or wherever they are in the world, to serve with us for 6 months, to be able to bring that research capacity into the university and to be able to have on their side as benefits an opportunity to see how advisory services on small states and small island developing states issues are evolved in a commercial context through the University of the West Indies. But thirdly, and most importantly, we're very conscious that there are so many professionals all across the world who have graduated proudly from the University of the West Indies. Many of them are serving in senior or top positions in countries and companies all around the world. We want them to get in touch with us because we want to be able to demonstrate the international nature of the University of the West Indies through its graduates. How can we then use their resources for them to create new commercial opportunities for them to provide advisory services through UWI Consulting, but most importantly, to pair their international expertise with our Caribbean orientation and to provide strong international oriented best practice advisory services to our region, to our companies, to our public sector practitioners, to our regional development organizations, all under the umbrella of the University of the West Indies in all of its incarnations, past, present, and those that are about to be future.
Excellent. I think many, many graduates will be very interested to hear about this new opportunity. I think it will also open people's eyes to actually the value that the university adds to the region in terms of its research capacity and the amazing skills and talents of its graduates the world over. I know that in my travels across the Caribbean and North America and in Europe, meeting other graduates, I'm constantly amazed at the caliber of graduates that we have produced in that. I'm not amazed at that. I know that that's a product of the university. What I'm amazed at is how far they have gone in all of the organizations and companies that they have been employed at. Most of them have achieved top management, some executive management, some are actually in charge of the organizations. And it is, it's very, very gratifying to know that our graduates are making such an impact, not only regionally, but worldwide at these high levels. So I think it's an opportunity for those at high level, but also from what you have said at all levels that are of professionals to keep in touch with the UWI Consulting Company, give their information, and also as their careers develop, to see how they can benefit from the advisory services, the commercial opportunities, etc., and how they can also help the region benefit from these. Because I think it's very important for us to work together as a region and never forget, our as you say the similarities and the peculiarities that bind us, that make us so unique and so special.
Absolutely. I mean, under your division, the Institutional Advancement Division, we've now launched the phenomenal initiative of UWI Gives Back. And so we're trying to raise and mobilize financial resources for the university so that the university is able to continue to execute many of its important programs. But giving back could take many forms. And one of those ways, of course, would be engagement with the university through partnerships like UWI Consulting. So, for example, there are many people who may have done an undergraduate degree at the University of the West Indies. Just recently, we saw the partnership with Oxford University in Kingston, Jamaica. How many of our graduates who have gone on to universities elsewhere, who are now serving in top positions, will have an opportunity to give back to the university through their skills, through their services, and then by extension, how can they have an opportunity to give back to the region which has birthed us? Again, also through the University of the West Indies Consulting Company. And that's something that I think is important to us. There are many of us, I'm not the only one, but for me, there are many of us who have worked around the world, but we've always known that we were going to come back because this was our region and we always wanted to be able to give our skills to the region. And when we talk about brain drain and tertiary level educated professionals leaving the region and going and living elsewhere, that's one side of the equation, but there are many of us who do come back. And then there are those who don't come back, but are looking for genuine opportunities to give back, even from where they are. And I think this is a prime opportunity for them to be able to use their skills and do just that.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, well, we've talked a lot about the UWI Consulting. I'm sure we'll come back to that. But let's talk a little bit about you. Give us an idea of your beginnings and where you spent most of your formative years and how you eventually became a diplomat.
Well, much of it is accidental, I think. Probably not. I think I may have thought it was accidental, but when I look back in retrospect, each step became the foundation, or what I call the institutional scaffolding that laid the foundation for the next step. So I went to secondary school here in Barbados. I went to community college here in Barbados. And I wasn't certain after community college what I wanted to do at university. I knew I wanted to apply to Mona, and I had two choices when I applied. And they were as diverse as night and day. So my first choice was international relations, and my second choice was social work. The two were completely unconnected. And I remember my then history tutor said to me, Lisa, you're far more along the international relations spectrum than you are social work. But I was interested in social work at the time because I was in Rotaract, a junior Rotary from as far back as then. And I was really intrigued by working with children's homes and persons who were vulnerable and communities who were disadvantaged. But he said, no, Lisa, you could do that as part of your service organizations that you may be a part of, but international relations is your first choice. And just like that, the course, or rather the trajectory of my life was predetermined. So off I went to Jamaica, and you had people like now Professor Jessica Byron and Dr. Stephen Vassiani and those guys who were lecturers at the time, and they were fascinating. I was completely fascinated by the world of international relations and diplomacy and what I considered then and still consider now the smoke and mirrors of interstate relations. And I returned to Barbados in 1997 in May, and by the end of that year, I joined the Foreign Service. And there was never a single day that was the same as the day before. And I say to people all the time, I have a very short attention span. So the things that I do on a regular basis have to keep me engaged, and Foreign Affairs absolutely did that. So in those years, I covered from Europe, Africa relations to the United Nations. I was posted to the UN headquarters for a part of 2000 to be a part of the delegation supporting the negotiation of the Millennium Development Goals and the Millennium Development Assembly and Summit being held in New York at the time. And that was life-changing for me. Moving on from there then, I was posted to Washington, and I lived in Washington in the US by extension in the post-September 11th era. So that exposed me then to international terrorism and international security issues. And so I started to see how all of those things then coincided with an international development agenda and how international relations and diplomacy, particularly in the steady march to war with Iraq, became really an important part of the global discourse. And then finally, one time I was in Venezuela at an international, a hemispheric meeting, I should say, on poverty, social inclusion, and equity in the Americas. And we could not reach agreement. We could not agree on what the hemisphere wanted to do on issues that were so important to the countries in the region. And the reason for that was because the Cancun Summit on Trade had been held a couple of months before, and they had collapsed. The talks there had collapsed, World Trade Talks. And I realized then that I had charted a path all the way through international relations, all of the international economic policy, international environment policy, then international security, hemispheric security, and suddenly I was thrust almost accidentally into the world of international trade and how it, connected to all these other things. And I decided I wanted to specialize in international trade and how that then would drive a development agenda. And I've never turned back since then. So during that time, I had the opportunity to be the national focal point for the CSME for Barbados for several years in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The lead national focal point was in the Prime Minister's office, and I was supporting that role from Foreign Affairs. And that became my first introduction to what the regional project stood for. And it birthed my passion for regionalism. I understood the significance of where I'd come from in the world, now to looking at this subsector, this small thing called the Caribbean, which was grand in history and grand in vision and grand in ambition, but really was just a dot on the global landscape. And I wanted from that very stage then, from that moment, to be able to contribute to what my region was going to be and how it was going to position itself in the world. And that changed my orientation a bit. So once I did trade, I decided that I never wanted to work in a metropole. I never wanted to work in a large space. I wanted always to be a part of that organic, that indigenous development of small states, of developing states, of least developed economies, because that's where our skills were needed most. And so when I was recruited by the Commonwealth Secretariat to go off to East Africa, everyone else said, "You're going where?" And I said, "Yay, I'm ready." That's perfect. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to, get from behind the desk at times and get into the fields and start to experience what coffee production was like in Ethiopia and what vanilla production was like in Uganda. And I wanted to see what private sector development was like in rural areas and how we could urbanize that. And, so what was an accidental moment, I would have to say, in Venezuela on poverty, then morphed into what really has been a a passion of mine for development and a commitment to Caribbean development and small island developing state interests specifically. And I'm not sure what would make that change at this point. That's what makes me get up every single morning and get going. That's what gets me up sometimes at night and sends me to my computer to start to type furiously something that has just popped into my head. That's what drives me.
That's amazing. That's a wonderful passion to have. It's interesting that you mentioned that you worked with Foreign Affairs and you are the focal person for CSME, because the Vice Chancellor also has a group of students called the UNCTAD Ambassadors, Students Today, Alumni Tomorrow. And one of their mandates is regional integration and CSME. I'm responsible for that group, and they are beginning to do great work. And they have actually just joined with the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors program, and hopefully you'll hear a lot more. So I'm going to be calling on you personally to get your expertise in that vein, because I really believe that this is the generation that is living CSME, and they need to have as much guidance as possible and make the right decisions. I think the young people now, by looking around the world, they can see that the decisions have consequences, especially in this time, and are learning to really be aware and to take ownership of the fact that the world is theirs, and they need to look after it if they wanted to see it continue to prosper. So that's great. Great. So how would you describe yourself in 3 words?
3 separate words or 3 words as part of a sentence?
Anything you want.
Okay. Strong-willed. The first one. Very innovative. Committed.
Excellent. 3 wonderful words. And I believe they show your character and characteristics. Do you believe that these characteristics are necessary in today's world? Being strong-willed?
I think so. I think one of the things that's always been important to me, and I say it to my daughter all of the time, is you have to have a very strong sense of who you are, what you represent, and what you want to see happen in every given thing, no matter how small it is. And that allows you to create that anchor and that base that very little can sway you from. You have an opportunity to hear the perspectives of others, and you have to always be open-minded to hear that which is being said by those around you. I think that when you surround yourself with other people who have their own perspective, it helps you to have yours evolve. But if you sway with everything that everyone else thinks, sometimes correctly, sometimes incorrectly, so you're never sure about where you stand. For me, for example, one of the concerns, for example, I'll give you this as an example. In the last couple of years has been what I consider to be the coming to a grinding halt of what I consider to be the CARICOM project. So we should have been further along since 2001. Since 2011, those were important milestones for us. But for some reason, we haven't gone further along than we have now. But there are many diverse voices saying many different things. Are we to be driven by those voices that are either for or against advancing the regional integration project, or are you going to be confident that what you see as the importance of regional integration is what it ought to be, and that it's augmented by those who share that view from multiple different perspectives, or are you going to take a step back because that's what's before you? I'm committed to going forward, and I'm not taking a step back. And so that strong-willed personality says to me, no, Lisa, regional integration is absolutely a necessity. The University of the West Indies absolutely must be at the forefront of driving that and providing solutions, and you absolutely must be a part of that. And there's very little that can sway me from that.
Excellent, excellent. We're going to switch it up a little bit. I'd like to find out now, what do you worry about and why?
What do I
worry about and why?
The most important thing that I worry about is vision, the lack of vision. So when I say, for example, the CARICOM project has stalled, I accompany those thoughts with the question of what is our vision for ourselves for the future? There are so many things that we are doing now, that we see now, that our ancestors and our forefathers saw from in their time, and they laid the foundation for us to be in that space now. What have we done that lays the foundation for those that come afterwards? You have in Europe, for example, young voters in the UK saying that you have a majority of older voters who have created a future for them that they don't want for themselves. That's not part of their vision for their own country's development and their own national development. And so vision concerns me. We have in the United States, for example, what is the vision for the United States, as they call it, to make themselves great again? You know, vision is the underpinning, very much so, of so much of what's happening around us, both right here in the Caribbean and externally in the rest of the world. And I think that in many instances, unfortunately, we're taking some giant steps backwards, and we're reversing many of the gains that those who had a vision for us, before we had a vision for ourselves, have put in place to our benefit. And that's one of the major concerns for me. The offshoot of that concern is that the narrative around that lack of vision, or that narrow vision, is unfortunately not what it should be. Sometimes we make very simplistic assessments about what are complex issues, or we offer superficial solutions to what are multidimensional problems, and that also is an offshoot of vision. And so that's really my major concern. What kind of world is my 17-year-old daughter, almost, going to live in when she's 25 or when she's 30? What have we done to create a platform that our children can thrive in?
That's very true. And I think each generation is really responsible for what the other generation experiences, as you say. And it's unfortunate. I think there is vision. However, it's very difficult to get the vision to become a reality, and I think that really, as you say, is a challenge, and something that perhaps we can throw out as a challenge to all our UE grads, to say we all have a responsibility. What can we do together, collectively, wherever we are in the world, to make the decisions and that our leaders make really be ones that we will all benefit from in the future. It's a very complex situation, but one that we all have a responsibility for. I don't think we can afford to be apathetic anymore, any of us. We have to really say, you know, it's my turn to take a stand, and I have to let my voice be heard. So it's serious times across the globe.
The other thing about that, Celia, is that when we talk about vision, it's important that we stage it. So there are short-term responses for immediate problems, and there are medium-term solutions to short-term problems, but vision is over the long term. So I feel as if many of us are responding through our narrative to immediate problems by providing short-term solutions. But that's not vision. That doesn't take us down the road in 10 years' time. So, for example, we may have a fiscal deficit that we're trying to resolve, or we may have a budget shortfall that we're trying to address. But what is our overall trajectory? And how do we see ourselves achieving that over the medium term and then into the long term? And our discussion on addressing short-term challenges has to migrate into addressing a long-term trajectory, which is based on vision. And I feel as if the narrative across the region is very short-term at the moment.
So the narrative really has to change, and we have to be prepared to make the difficult decisions, and we all, no matter what level we are at in society, have to put in the work.
Absolutely.
To see the vision fulfilled in the future.
Absolutely. Each successive generation, in my view, has to pay it forward. So we have those that paid it forward for us. We have to now pay it forward for those that come behind us. What is our installment that we are going to pay in our regional development, in our national development, and in positioning the Caribbean in the world? What are we called on to do? And the university has to be in the forefront of attempting to change that narrative, to change the discourse, and to lead the development of visioning for us as a region, based on empirical analysis and based on an understanding of where the world is.
That's true. What does family mean to you? You've mentioned your daughter several times. I can relate to that. I have two daughters myself.
Well, that's what grounds me. I can do any number of things in any given day, or I can travel around the world and I can sit in any forum. But when I come home, that's what grounds me. Many years ago, an old friend said these words to me. They said, "Lisa, you could be a strong woman. You could be a professional woman. You could be a career woman. But at some point, you have to also be equally comfortable with being a woman and all that goes into what being a woman means." And for me, the epitome of that is motherhood. Having an opportunity to shepherd this young person into adulthood and to share with them what it means to be not just that career woman, that independent woman, that professional woman, but what it also means to be a compassionate human being, to be someone with honor, to be someone who cares for others. So, for example, I'm a Rotarian. I just this weekend was sworn in as the new president of the Rotary Club of Barbados, and I expose her to that. So sometimes, for example, she's on the road with me going to children's homes, looking at how to help those in the community. That's such an important part of me, part of who I am. How do I create a gift to my society that is a good, decent, strong, well-rounded human being in the person of my daughter? That's important to me.
Well said. And I hope that many parents have the same attitude you do, because it's really important that parents teach their children that they really are here but for a short time and they have to contribute while they're here. I think that's very important. Coming off of that, I'm getting to know you a little bit better through this conversation. Would you say you would prefer to be liked or to be respected?
I'd say respected.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say respected.
And can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, I'll use a current scenario to explain it. So, social media is blowing up with the speech that Jesse Williams made at the BET Awards on the Black Lives Matter campaign, Black Lives Matter campaign in the United States. And you have, as of the last couple of days, the backlash that has come with that, and you have people of the Caucasian orientation arguing for him to be fired because they're very offended by his remarks. And many people are getting in this discussion. Look at the backlash now, and so on. But for me, when I look at that, I see two things. I see a man who has stood up, having made a calculated decision that this was something that he felt was important to be said. This was something that he stood for and he wanted to have represented. And it is my view that anyone who makes those kinds of calculated decisions, they do so in full knowledge that there are those who will like and not like what they have to say, and that there will inevitably be backlash. But that you respect him for having said it is unconnected, in my view, to whether you like him as a person or not. And so for me, I use that as an example to say I am comfortable in my own skin. I think I try to be kind, I try to be gracious, I try to be respectful in all that I do, but I'm also not going to back down from difficult things and challenging decisions because I want people to like me. It's more important to me that you respect what I've done and what I stand for. And over the course of time, when you come to know me, chances are you'll like me more as a person.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely the way to go. And I think everyone would like to be liked, but I don't think everyone has learned the lesson you have learned, that it's more important to be respected than to be liked. Because sometimes then you compromise your own principles in order to be liked, which is definitely not the way to go. You mentioned that you work with Rotaract. What else do you do in your free time?
Well, one of the things that we're going to do this year is to start a program dealing with vulnerable women. What
Hmm.
we what we've seen in Barbados in particular is that with the recessionary conditions, you have a number of women who are working. We have a predominantly single family led family structure here, and that single family led is usually by a woman, a single parent. And we've seen so many instances where the social safety net in Barbados is cast quite wide. So education up to secondary level, used to be tertiary level, is now free at the point of consumption. It's paid by taxes, and the same applies to medical care and health services. So persons are able to access those things. But there are those who are not working at all, who are, in addition to those social services, able also to access welfare services. So they get support for food vouchers and that kind of thing. But there is a class of people in this country now facing recession, people who are still working but are unable to make ends meet. And they are largely women. And in many of those households, they have young girls. And there is a direct correlation that we have been finding between early sexualization of young girls because they find themselves in positions where they're asking men for money or for support one way or the other, and sometimes these become predatory type relationships. But these women, these mothers, these heads of households don't qualify for social support services anywhere because they're working. So one example we know of now is a mother who is working for a company who has been downsizing because they have not been able to earn revenue and turn that into profit in a recessionary climate. And so the company chose, because they're largely staffed by single parents, not to lay off workers, but just to reduce hours so that you did get something, but just not as much as you were getting before. So you have a mother who, for example, is earning $700 a month, but her rent hasn't changed. It's still $600 a month. So by the time she's figured out how to keep a roof over her head and those of her and her three children, she has no money for anything else. So you have children, two girls in particular, who are on the streets begging, hungry, and there's no support service that will help them because why? Their mother is working. So what we're trying to do now is to launch a partnership with farmers co-ops, supermarkets, catering companies, and hotels so that we are able to provide food support for those families at a minimum, as well as capacity for them to be able to prepare meals in their homes by providing them with things like gas, cooking gas, and that kind of thing. So that's my latest undertaking in this year.
Wow, that sounds very ambitious and very, very worthwhile. So I wish you all the best of luck in that. You must keep us updated how it goes.
I will.
So what do you do now, though, to relax and to have fun?
Can I tell you what, Celia? Despite all of the activities that I'm involved in, when I do have a moment, I'm the most introverted person that you will ever meet.
Can't believe that.
I'm telling you, there are those times when, for me, relaxation is not going to a party. For many people, relaxation on a Friday night is about going to happy hour or to a club. That's the last thing that I want to do. I'm happiest in my house, on my couch, with the phones turned off, with the TV on mute, and a good book in my hand and a glass of wine. And I'm happiest there.
Sounds like a good evening to me. Talking about reading, what's the last book you read? What do you enjoy reading?
Well, I have a thing for historical novels. So I like books that chronicle different times in our lives. So when I lived in Africa, I was bombarded by reading material. I loved the bookstores. I could never get enough. I think the largest thing that I brought back to the region with me was my book collection. And so from there, I was able to read from about the Mau Mau Rebellion, apartheid in South Africa, Nelson Mandela. You read about the Congo and how the country evolved in multiple incarnations. One of the most fascinating books that I read was about the genocide in 1994 in Rwanda. I'm fascinated by that kind of stuff. I'm not into romance novels or fantasy or anything like that. The book I'm currently reading is one I bought when I was in Jamaica a few weeks ago, just 2 weeks ago now. It's called Glimpses of a Global Life. It's the biography of Sridhar Ramphal. And I'm reading that alongside something that's far less well scripted, but also but nonetheless well written. It's the and the evolution of the inner city communities in Kingston.
Oh, okay. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So life
in Caribbean literature, in Caribbean literature. I probably own everything that's been written by every Caribbean novelist.
Excellent, excellent. And have you had I know you've lived in Barbados. Have you had a chance to live anywhere else in the region?
I lived in Jamaica for 3 years when I went to Mona. So that's very much a second home to me. But I've not lived anywhere else in the Caribbean.
Have you had a lot of opportunity to travel within the Caribbean?
I've probably gone to nearly every Caribbean country, yes.
And which one sticks out to you as being another island that you could settle in, or are there several?
Jamaica?
Jamaica, but are there several others?
No. I think I have tunnel vision where that is concerned. My friends in Jamaica call me an adopted yardie.
That's very nice. I do hope that more Caribbean people get the opportunity to travel around the region, because that's something that in my job I've had to do, and each Caribbean island is special and unique, and I think many of us will be able to say, where we were born with pride, but we also choose to be Caribbean.
Yes.
I feel that I'm Jamaican by birth, but Caribbean by choice, and I get the same impression from you.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot more young people are feeling that the opportunities lie within the region, and we should all be strengthening each other and looking out for each other. So.
And UWI has been a part, and I consider UWI to be in the forefront of that. How many of us left our homes and went to another UWI campus, forged relationships and friendships, and saw more of the region through its people from being on a university campus? That is something that you couldn't really put a price on. There's something invaluable about that.
Absolutely, and there have been many marriages coming out of UWI as a result of that. But also just the general understanding and the friendships and the camaraderie across the region, which are lifelong, so it's really extremely valuable. Right. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today on Pelican Talks. We are sure that everyone has enjoyed having you and listening to you, and we look forward to having you on as a guest in the future.
Thank you so much for having me and inviting me, Celia.
You're welcome. So that's it, everyone. Pelican Talks is over for today. We are sure that it has brought you both positivity and talent with our wonderful guest, Lisa Cummins. Thank you for being with us. Take care.